Hi guys, it's Josh from Recovery Talks, and I am the host of this amazing podcast. And I know I actually haven't been around for quite a while, so I do apologise, but I've managed to get in contact with this amazing gentleman called Declan, who's got a phenomenal story to share for all of the listeners that may be listening today or in the near future. And let's hope that somebody will be encouraged with this message of hope. And maybe somebody may get some strength from this story as well. Just to let you know that I am sponsored by the amazing Money Wellness. Now, Money Wellness, what they do is they support you every step of the way. So if you are struggling with any form of debt or financial issues at all, then I highly recommend if you get in contact with them. The only reason why I do have them as a sponsor, and I'm very lucky to have them as a sponsor, because I was that person that was really struggling financially, and I've managed to get in hold of them. And you know what? I never look back. And now I sit here today debt free. So obviously it does work. And I highly recommend for you to try it out and see how you get on. So, Declan, how are you doing today? You okay?
Good, thanks, Josh, mate. Yep, how are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. Declan, I remember we had that conversation at the beginning, when we first I think I reached out to you, didn't I?
That was back in April?
April, yeah. It was quite a long time ago, wasn't it? And, you really jumped out at me, obviously, with your videos on TikTok, which we will give you a shout out for that as well, to get some people to follow you at the end of this. But yeah, your story really jumped out to me, just because of how real it is, that you was just very open and honest about not just about what you've been through on a personal level, but also about your sexuality as well, which I think is very, very, amazing, because a lot of people need to kind of know that it's okay to be who you are. And you're one of them people, Declan. And that's why I reached out to you, because I was like, I really want to know more about you. So, Declan, without further ado, let's just talk about you, because I don't want it to be about me. I really want to kind of get to the beginning of your story, of what it was like growing up in your single parent household, because I remember you was explaining that. So over to you, Declan.
Thanks, mate. So yeah, as you just mentioned, I grew up in a single parent household. I don't like using this term, but I do come from a multiple disadvantage. And that means, an area of poor social and economical wealth and stuff like that, single parent household. But on the flip side of that, I had such a loving family in childhood, and I still do have a loving family. But I was raised by my mum until I was 9, so I was an only child until I was 9 years old. And I've never met my biological father. He apparently left when I was 3 weeks old, so I'm 35 now, and I've never seen him. And I guess reflecting back on my childhood, not having that kind of immediate father figure in my life could be some of the reason as to why I've gone on to do the things I've gone on to do in my life. I'm not saying it is for definite, because I'm never going to know that, but it could be a factor. But it was lovely. It was just me and my mum. I've got very fond memories of my childhood. It was a brilliant time, and I'm really grateful that my mum did that, because it was her first time being a mum as well, and she was young when she had me, which is brilliant now, because we're like brother and sister rather than mother and son. But but yeah, it was a really, really lovely. I've got really fond memories, like I say, of my childhood growing up in that single parent household. She then met my sister's dad when I was 9, and then my little sister came along, and then her and my mum and him got married, and then got divorced in 2020. So they were married for a few years, and that was a weird dynamic to then step into, from being the only man in the house to then having a newborn sister and another man coming in. And that's when I really started to notice that kind of dynamic shift. And again, upon reflection, looking back, I guess there were times where I wasn't kind of emotionally held or listened to. And also, I now know, I had undiagnosed ADHD. So that kind of also fed into me being a little shit when I was younger. So do you know what I mean? Like, looking back now, it just all makes sense. But yeah, that was a difficult kind of thing to shift into, especially at such a young age, at 9 and 10. Yeah, that was that. Yeah. But again, fond memories, although I completely disrespected my stepdad at the time. You know, like, who the fuck are you? So yeah, that was a really big dynamic to kind of switch into, from being a only child in a single parent household to then my little sister being born, my stepdad moving in. And I hated it. I fucking hated it. Like, absolutely hated it. And I think, looking back, it was that, how dare you step into this household? Like, what are you doing? It's my mum. Don't you dare take her away from me, sort of thing. And obviously, as I know now, I've got ADHD, but back then it was completely undiagnosed. So that kind of further perpetuated the behaviour of me being an absolute shit. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah, I do have fond memories of being with my mum for those first 9 years. And the rest of my family, I guess, as well. My nan was and still is a very active part of my life. And I was very lucky to have my great-gran as well. And, you know, I'd often get picked up from school by her, and my mum was working as well. I forgot to mention, my mum still maintained a job. Yeah. And I was very well supported and looked after. But things did start to change, I guess, emotionally for me when my little sister and my stepdad kind of came into my life. So
yeah. And I think it's something that a lot of people that are probably going to be listening to this as well, when something like that happens, aka, you know, when a father leaves the scene, you know, from whatever age, even like you said, from such a young age that you don't even remember, from what I gather, it does have an effect to you later on down the line, doesn't it? And then obviously, especially when somebody else then steps in, as we call them, you know, stepdads or stepmums, if this is a female that's listening to this, and, you know, their mamas may have gone and they've got a stepmum. It is such a big shift and a big change, because you're kind of like, you've looked at that one sole parent that's done everything for you, to then having a big massive change. It does have an effect on you. It may not have an effect on you at the beginning, but it does. I see it slowly over a period of time. You start to sit there and you start to question things, don't you?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you still look at your sole parent and go, but yeah, you're doing an amazing job. Yeah. But sometimes you just don't get it, or what's going on around that as well.
I completely agree, mate. And unfortunately, by that dynamic shifting, like, emotionally, I wasn't kind of looked after, I don't think, when all of that was going on. So I had undiagnosed ADHD. I was very sensitive anyway. I was born gay, right? I had all of my own emotions going on. I was 10, so I was aware of everything. And I couldn't speak to anyone because I wasn't listened to, or I was branded as naughty or restless, or just sit down and shut up, which suppressed all of that. So I look back now and I think, is there any reason that I turned to stimulants as a form of escape and as a form of self-medication? And I really did, for years, I resented my mum, like resented her. And I'm only recently starting to develop that compassion, that I don't need her to be accountable for what happened. I just need to accept that it happened, and I need to move the fuck on. You know, and I think that acceptance piece can be quite difficult for people, but I think it's also a very normal part of your journey, you know, especially when you've decided to go into recovery, when you've abused substances I abused substances for 18 years. And then you start to look at all areas of your life, past, present, future, and you think, fuck, how do I piece all this together, man? And all of the feelings, every single feeling on the spectrum, just, you have to go through it, and you've got to really kind of sit with it and understand it. And for ages, I was so analytical. I was like, why am I feeling this? What do I want from it? I want accountability. But now I'm like, what's that going to achieve? You know?
Yeah.
Just move
Definitely.
on. Like, just be grateful that you've got a roof over your head, you're back with your mum, you know, your family completely support you, and they have done throughout your entire reckless phase of life. And I'm now shifting from that wanting accountability to being fucking grateful for what I've got and what the support that I've had, because I can sit here and say that I know I'm lucky and I know I am grateful and I have all the love in the world for my family, because there were times where they did turn their back on me, and there are people out there that don't have a mum or a dad or a parent or any figure like that that they can go to when they are in dire straits and just be supported. You know, this year has been so monumental in my own transformation, because I was given the opportunity to move back home rent free, focus on yourself. If this is what you want to do, commit to it and let's see some action. And that's all I had to do, you know, and it's an ongoing process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight and it's going to take the rest of my life. You know, like I said to you earlier, recovery isn't a destination, it's a journey, and it's an ongoing commitment to yourself to want to be just a little bit better than you were yesterday, you know?
And it's brilliant how you're putting that as well, because it would be amazing, you know, everybody is probably sitting at home listening going, yeah, I just want it to end now, you know, but like you said, it's a journey that you have to go through.
Yeah.
As hard as it's going to be, the journey you go through, there will be bumps in the road. There will be times where you feel like you're going 10 steps back
Yeah.
and you're only doing one step forward. But every step forward that you go through and go with is a massive accomplishment.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's something that a lot of us are guilty of. You know, even though we've gone 10 steps back, we don't really celebrate for that one step that we've taken forward, because we look back at the stuff that's been going on.
Even those 10 steps backwards, we look at them and we hate ourselves for doing that. But a lot of us fail to recognize or realize actually what perpetuated me or enabled me to do that. What was missing in my life that I went backwards, but also then looking at it from a self-compassion perspective, like, oh my God, yeah, shit, it doesn't really matter as long as I keep going forward, you know?
Definitely.
Obviously, that's subjective and that's personal to everybody, because there are situations where going backwards can mean something quite severe. Of course, I appreciate that, but it's just recognizing that recovery as a whole is it isn't linear. There is no black and white. There is no be all and end all. There's no one size fits all solution. There's nothing like that exists. You know, recovery is so self-defined. And I've really learned that this year, that recovery means something different to different people. And I respect that and I accept that.
Yeah, which is amazing. And thanks for your honesty with that as well, because again, you know, when you hear other people share and just how honest they can be and go, do you know what? Yeah, I fucked up. Yeah, I went through them trials. But the most amazing thing is that we can share that, and that can
Yeah.
be strength for other people as well. I think that's important.
And it's all about turning your pain into purpose as well. It's kind of having those moments of slipping or whatever and going, okay, what can I learn from this? You know, what can I do better to ensure that I don't go back as far, or I don't go back at all, or, you know, it's just using that and then using what you've learned to then educate people, which is
Definitely.
what I'm trying to do. Now, I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. I will never be perfect. I don't want to be perfect, because that aspiration, A, it doesn't exist in my eyes, and B, it's far too much pressure to put on somebody that has already gone through so much shit. I mean, what does perfect even mean? I think it's so, the idealization we have as a society of what perfection looks like is so warped, and it's so damaging, that just be better than yesterday. I'm 100% better than I was this time last year, but this year alone has been a roller coaster for sure. But I'm sat here knowing that I am 100% better than I was this time last year. And you know what? That for me is good enough right now.
Yeah,
You
that's
know?
amazing. Yeah, that's great, and it's amazing how you look at that as well. I call them like golden nuggets. You know, people can
Yeah.
listen to that and go, "Oh, yeah, that's true." um, I really want to speak about, because obviously you touched very, at the beginning, a little bit basic when you came out. You know, when you came out as
Yeah.
gay. We both can agree, and probably people that are sitting at home, they're a little bit older. You know, back in the day, whenever somebody said, I'm gay, or if anyone that came out, it was very frowned upon back then. It wasn't really sort of spoken about much, wasn't very socially accepted. I remember that, even from my school years as well. If somebody came out as gay, oh my God, that there was tenfold of people that were absolutely annihilating that young person and basically getting bullied. But the sad thing is, even though today, LGBTQ plus, it's very, it's very dominant out there. It's very out there. It's very accepted now. There is still that time, and there is that gap. There is still a few people that still struggle to do
Yeah,
with
of
that. And I
course.
really want to kind of speak about your sort of experience of what it was like when it was, when you did come out as gay. Did you feel supported, or was it a struggle for you in any way?
I think it was a bit of both. The struggle come from me. It was an internal struggle, and I think a lot of gay men or LGBTQ plus people can relate to that, because you're like, am I, aren't I, fuck, what am I? you know.
Yeah.
But I'm very lucky in the fact that I've always had a mind of my own. I've always been very self-aware. And a lot of people say, you're wise beyond your years. You've been here before. You're an old soul. And I get that. I understand why they say that, because at times I feel like I am. But especially when it comes to coming out, I knew from a very young age about who I liked and why I liked them, and I came out very young. I was 15, 16 when I came out. And if you remember at the beginning, I said I was brought up in an area of multiple disadvantage. And I think growing up in those sorts of areas on the streets sort of thing gives you such a thick skin, right? And gives you a whole different set of skills. And the foundations of your personality are based on that and the area that you come from. So I knew I could hold my own. Like, you want to fight me, bring it on. I don't give a shit what you say. I am what I am. If you don't like it, that's a you problem. And I've always been like that. And I think coming from an area like that has enabled me to have that thick skin that you approached. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when it came to coming out, the confidence that I had and the absolute sincerity that I had kind of stemmed from that. So there was no big issue. There was a big issue in terms of there was no problems in coming out. People were like, oh yeah, we knew. Like, obviously you are. And I was like, what do you mean? you know? Like, but no, I came out to all my school friends, my teachers, my mum. I think my mum was the hardest one to come out to, because I actually, the week before I did come out, we had a massive row, huge row. And I'm going to be really honest here. I was thrown out of my family home by my stepdad at the time. That's how much we didn't get on. And, when I needed my mum the most in that situation, she wasn't there because she sided with him, which then, as I've gotten older, kind of further perpetuated that resentment feeling. But whatever, I'm over that now. But so we had this massive row. I got thrown out and went to live with my nan for a week. And then a day later, my mum phones. She's crying down the phone to my nan. She's like, I think Declan's gay. So when I went, you gay? I went, yeah. She went, oh, yeah, he is. that was it.
Just simple.
That was it. That was it. God's honest. God, strike me down if I'm lying. That is it. That's the extent of my coming out story. But if I hadn't have had that confidence and the personality to be able to just go like, yeah, this is me. don't think it would have been that easy. And I completely appreciate and empathize with people who have severe struggles coming out and accepting their identity and being disowned, you know, and I can't even imagine or begin to imagine what that's like, because I never experienced it. And I'm grateful for that, because when it's come to my sexuality, it's always been accepted, you know, even by my granddad immediately. My nan and granddad are both in their late 70s now. They were, you know, my granddad was is a proper macho man, very, you know, can be very narrow-minded, but no problem. So my stepdad at the time even said, because he used to be in and out of prison, you know, again, you can imagine the growing up that I had with him. In and out of prison, and he was like, if you get any fucking trouble, you come and see me and I'll sort it out. I was like, I'm gonna fight my own battles, but thanks.
You know? Nice one, mate.
But yeah, it was no issue for me, and I felt immediately accepted and supported by my family, which is a lovely thing for me to be able to sit here and tell you. The funny thing is, growing up, my gaydar is shit, right? I've got such a shit gaydar. But in school, I was like, he's gay. Is he gay? Is he gay? And then growing up, I'm like, oh, he is gay. But it's just so funny now seeing like schoolmates I used to go to school with come out and stuff. And I'm like, fuck me. I would have never known, because they hid it so well. Whereas now, I've always been me. I've been different versions of myself. Of course I have. But I've always been me to the core. Yeah.
That's amazing. No, I really appreciate that, because it's great to have, different people's, lifestyles of how it's kind of affected them or how it hasn't affected them. But yeah, it'll be great to, obviously, before we end this, it'll be great to kind of get your sort of, maybe a little bit of, what's the word? Something that you can encourage others if they're struggling at all, or
Absolutely.
if maybe they're listening to this and sitting at home and they may not know how to come out or whatever. Because I'm sure, it's a sense of relief as well. I'm sure, especially.
100%. It's almost like the weight of the world just finally evaporates off of you, and you're like, oh, I can be me. But then it's like, oh, what does me look like? Who am I? So it's that whole kind of venturing into the unknown again, where you're like, fuck, who even am I? And it's developing then that sort of identity. But what I will say about being gay, I'm a proud gay man. I love being a gay man. It's just the perspective that I have on things is completely different to somebody else's, and I love that.
Yeah.
The negatives of that are that certain people, especially gay men, we can be very nasty to each other, and we can be unaccepting, we can be very judgmental, we can be very stigmatizing. And it's those sorts of behaviors that, growing up, as I was venturing into the gay scene, those sorts of negative behaviors that I witnessed and faced myself fed into me becoming a bit introverted, which then not forced me, but kind of was a main factor in me using drugs. Because if I can't be me within my own community, then where the fuck do I belong?
Yeah.
And it's something that I'm really passionate about now. It's that, and I will say this, I want this on my tombstone. If gay men can just be a little bit more kinder to each other, wouldn't that be a great place to start?
That's amazing. Yeah.
Because we're already, the LGBTQ community as a whole are marginalized, quote unquote. Then you've got those sorts of negative behaviors that kind of get projected on people who might suffer with addiction or other things, mental health. So they're then forced into another corner of the community, which then means that they use substances even more to cope. So when you look at it from a chemsex perspective, the LGBTQ community is marginalized, and then the chemsex community is even marginalized even further within that already marginalized community. So it's like, it's not just about having sex and taking drugs.
Yeah.
It's so much more than that. You know, it's a beast when it comes to looking at it from all psychological angles and all behavioral angles. It's so complex as to why people partake in those activities, that as somebody who's done it and was addicted to it for years, I'm only just scratching the surface as to why I even did it, you know.
Yeah.
But
Because I was gonna say to you, you know, in regards to, you know, you said that you came out, everyone's really been accepting about it.
yeah,
But I know you had an introduction to drugs.
yes,
You know, again at a young age as well.
yeah,
With a lot of people that may be listening that will probably nod there and go, yeah, that was me as well, young age.
yeah.
And how did that introduction to drugs at that age, you know, with, I believe it was like 16, impact your
Yeah.
sort of self-worth and how you viewed yourself?
It was 16, 17 at the time, and it was a hookup with a gay guy,
Yeah.
right? So, and I was so against drugs. I cannot tell you how against all drugs that I was. I mean, I started smoking when I was 11. Nicotine was the only thing that I did, right? Smoking cigarettes. But I was so against hard drugs. And then I'll never forget, I'm not going to say his name, but he was a restaurant manager. And I went to where he was working one night, and there was a flat upstairs. And then all of a sudden, I just saw this white powder on a bedside table. I was like, "What's that?" And he's like, "It's Coke. Do you want some?" I was like, "What does it do? What does it feel like?" And now I know that lack of impulse control that comes from ADHD probably enabled me to make a really poor decision and say, "Yeah, I'll have some," not knowing what it was, but more so from a curiosity perspective. And Adeline, and then everything just went quiet. I cannot tell you the relief that I felt, and what I mean by that is, anybody with ADHD will say a similar thing in terms of your mind is constantly going. Even when you're asleep, your mind is constantly on. It's on all of the time. So when I had my first line of Coke and it quieted the noise, I was like, shit. Right? I was like, holy mackerel, this is it. This is it, guys. I found the cure for whatever's going on up here. And 18 years later, I was still doing it, you know. And that's all it took. That's all it took was that one line. But again, that was introduced to me by a member of the LGBTQ community. So one of my very first introductions into the LGBTQ space was using drugs. So going out clubbing, being a bit mouthy, being a bit laddie, being a bit chavvy, you know, whilst then sniffing Coke, kind of the personality that I developed from that was fucking arrogance beyond belief, you know. And I wasn't liked. I wasn't liked on the scene at all. I really wasn't liked. I can now see why. I can laugh about it because I was a fucking idiot. But I wasn't liked, and that not being liked as somebody who was a people pleaser, somebody who's very out there, affected me emotionally, which then fed into me using more drugs. You know, so very quickly, those addictive patterns got established in my brain.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, I was hooked. I was a very high functioning addict when I would go through my addictive phases. I held a job down. Mind you, I was using it at work, but I still held the job down.
Yeah.
I masked it very well. It wasn't until about 5 years ago when I actually came out and told everybody. I was like, I've got a problem with cocaine. They were like, what the fuck? Didn't twig. And I think that's such a specific ADHD trait where we're so used to masking in order for us to fit in that hiding parts of me wasn't an issue. I'm an expert in that. It just so happens that I got away with it for so long, it became my entire identity.
Yeah.
And I would use it to cope. I would use it to quiet the noise down. I would use cocaine to allow me to be emotional because I wasn't taught how to be emotional, how to release those emotions, how to talk about my feelings. So in order for me to go through anything emotional or process emotional stuff, I would have to use drugs. And that's the really sad thing, that to do a very basic human psychological thing, I had to have help from a narcotic. And that little bag of white powder very, very quickly became my best friend.
Yeah.
Very quickly became my best friend. And I couldn't drink on an empty nose. I don't like alcohol. I'd go out, I'd be half a pint in, I'd be like, right, who's got the bag? And then I'd be gone for 4 days. And it's when that sort of behavior started happening in my life, is when things started really falling apart. I would go AWOL. Because as I was getting older, I was feeling more things, I was experiencing more things, but I was using cocaine to suppress that. So in order for me to process that, I would have to take myself away for days on end to really try and figure out what on earth's going on whilst having a good time, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But I look back now and I'm 18 years of my life, from the ages of 16 to 34, so 17 years, I lost to drug use,
Yeah.
And can I sit here and say, if I was listened to as a child, if I was understood as a child, if I was really if my emotional needs were met as a child, would I have gone down that path? I'd like to say no. And I think I believe that because I would be able to process emotions correctly. I would be able to feel things correctly. I would be able to understand the difference between right and wrong. I might have got diagnosed with ADHD as a child if I was able to express myself fully. But I can't. That's hindsight. That's hypothetical. I can't sit here and compare myself to a life that never existed, and I accept that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop you thinking, does it? 18 years is a long time. And I'm only 35.
There you go. Only 35 as well. So if anybody's listening at home, it's only 35. Let's get that right. We're only 30. Let's make that very clear. Yeah, still a baby. But I think it's very important to know as well, and to really have a good understanding, because when we do use any particular drug, that might be drug, it might be alcohol, it might be sex, it might be something else that you are helping to suppress your actual feelings and everything. It may be good at the start, and it's like everything. It's fucking amazing at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm not going to sit here today and say the beginning of it was shit, because it wasn't. You're like the life and soul of the party. Do you know what I mean? You go out and like you said at the beginning, everybody's having a good time. But then slowly, you start looking around you and you notice people start dropping off, and they're like, mate, who's this prick over here? Do you know what I mean? Or your identity change. That's such a powerful statement, because your identity starts to change.
Yeah.
Even though deep down in yourself your identity's changed you, then you're then battling because you're relying on that particular substance or thing that you're doing, because it's helping you think, it's helping you get through. And then slowly, we don't realize the harm, not just that we're causing other people, but the harm that we're causing ourselves.
Right.
And obviously, unfortunately, we can't see far beyond that what damage it's going to cause. But it does. It does cause damage, and it causes damage to people in lots of different ways, you know. But I know, so you were saying about your addiction now, so you kind of spin off that. So it has kind of, sounds like it spiraled out of control.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there was a specific moment, because you was mentioning Chemsex, is that correct? What you were saying?
Yep.
Chemsex, sorry. And I'm sure there's people listening, because I didn't have a clue what it was. I had to do my research, and I'm sure people at home that haven't a clue what it is, or they may have heard it, but they don't really have the true understanding about it. So would you be able to kind of introduce us to it, what it is, and how it impacted you, your relationships, mental health, and overall life?
100%. So for those of you that are listening that don't know what chemsex is, it's basically using stimulants or any other recreational drug to enhance the sexual experience. Chemsex is predominantly rife within the LGBTQ community, specifically between men who have sex with men. You don't need to be a gay man. You don't need to identify as a gay man or a bisexual man. It's just men who have sex with men. And I'll tell you, I've had experiences with men who identify as straight in a chemsex situation. So it's predominantly rife within the kind of MSM community, we call it, men who have sex with men. And it's dangerous. It's really, really dangerous, because I went from using cocaine to methamphetamine, crystal meth, in a heartbeat. Now, methamphetamine is the most potent amphetamine you can buy or you can get recreationally. It has a 12-hour half-life, whereas cocaine has a 30-minute half-life, right? So I went from sniffing lines of coke to smoking meth pipes, feeling completely invisible. I was like, holy fucking shit, this is a whole different ballgame, right? However, I'll take you back to my introduction. So I was 24 when I was first introduced to chemsex. And again, my introduction to that came from a gay couple, right? I was on Grindr, an app famously the orange app in the gay world. It's the only way I can describe it.
Best way.
Right? I was on there as you are at 24 years old, trying to figure out life. And I've been chatting to this couple for quite a while. They were local to my area, and they were like, do you want to come over and hang out? And I was like, yeah, fuck it, why not? By that time, I'd already been heavily using cocaine. So I started sniffing cocaine when I was 16. I'm now 24 years old. Got there, chilled out, one thing led to another. Then out came this bag of what I thought was coke, but it wasn't. It was MCAT. So my first introduction to chemsex and the substances that I was using were changing, and I started on MCAT. I then took to that like a fish to water or a duck to water, like, because I was like, holy shit, this is another experience that is feeding me dopamine. And I just want that to be a golden nugget from somebody that has ADHD. All of my experiences, addictive, non-addictive, are about how much dopamine I'm getting. And that's something I've really become aware of this year. So all of that was feeding me dopamine. I was like, sex, drugs, rock and roll, way, you know?
Yeah.
Which is bad. It's so bad. And then I took a break from it. I was using cocaine on and off whilst in chemsex sessions, but I really got back into it in 2021, so just after lockdown, and that was my introduction to crystal meth. It's also colloquially known as Tina or T in the chemsex community. And there are other drugs that people use, such as GHB, which is a depressant, acts a bit like alcohol, but a lot more severe. Ketamine, MCAT, poppers, cocaine, all of the stimulants, basically. So I was introduced to crystal meth in 2021. I had a hit and I was like, this is something. Then pair that with sex and you're like, holy fucking shit, this is a match made in heaven. So I very quickly fell into that downward chemsex spiral. And when I say to you that I saw my identity dissolve before my very eyes, I saw my identity dissolve before my very eyes. Tina, methamphetamine, completely changed me. Completely changed me. Every single area of my life was affected. You know, I lost my job, I lost my relationships, I lost everything that I had in my life just went down the pan. Because all I would worry about and all I could focus on, and my identity became chemsex. All right? It became smoking a meth pipe, getting off my face, going on Grindr, watching a fuck ton of porn, having threesomes, foursomes, moresomes, orgies, like the sexual experiences I'm not going to go into detail about, but I'll tell you, like, there's been a few that I could write a manual on, right? And we're talking sexual experiences that sober me would have no interest in. So what chemsex does, one of the other things that chemsex does, sorry, I should say, is that it really makes you lose all of your inhibitions so that your fantasies can very easily become reality. And then what happens with that is that things like consent and boundaries become very blurred. Wow. And we then see guys developing quite predatory behaviors towards other guys. So there are, and I have witnessed, men intentionally overdosing other men just to sleep with them. I myself have never been a victim of that because I've always retained, yet again, a level of awareness. I could be on another planet but still know exactly what's going on around me. And it's that side of chemsex that nobody really discusses because it's stigmatized, it's judged. It's like, oh, we don't talk about that because that doesn't happen. It does happen, and it's happening, and people are dying because it's happening. But then we look at the other side of it. So why do we do it in the first place? And I touched on it previously, and I think my own personal opinion as to why I did it was because of that lack of connection, that lack of acceptance, that lack of being emotionally seen, heard, and understood, you know? And for want of a better word, it was a sense of community, albeit a very unorthodox way to do it. It was still a sense of belonging. And that's why chemsex, in my opinion, again, is so addictive, because not only are you getting all the dopamine you could ever want in your life, you're getting accepted, you're getting sex on tap, you're getting, you know, everything just becomes completely, you are validated in that moment. That's why it's destructive. That's why it's dangerous. And that's why people are unfortunately losing their lives through it, because it's so easy to be in that scenario than focus on everything that it's flagging up that should be in your life, like community, deep emotional connections, you know. But how can we develop those if we're being stigmatized and we're being pushed into using drugs, we're being pushed into and being further marginalized by other members of our own community, right? So how do we develop those relationships? How do we develop those connections if we're not allowed to talk about that, you know?
Yeah.
The other element of chemsex is the sex part. It's not just the using drugs. I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a counsellor. I'm not a therapist, but it doesn't take a genius to work out that in order to talk about the addictive behaviors of chemsex and or drugs, you've got to be able to talk about the sex part as well. And that's what I found going into recovery or asking for help. I could only ever discuss the drugs because I wasn't allowed to talk about sex. So you're then telling me I can only bring 50% of myself to this meeting and I have to leave the other half of me at the door? That's why it's so complex in order to deal with it, because there aren't that many spaces that allow you to talk about the experience in its entirety, you know, and that then further perpetuates relapses, people not stopping using or using to the point where they overdose, you know, because they're not being heard. They're being listened to, but they're not being heard, and there's a difference there. I'm very lucky. Very lucky. I'm not religious in any way, shape, or form, but I thank God every day that I wake up alive now. Because I'll tell you, there were times, you know, I would keep myself awake for 4 or 5 days at a time. Crystal meth is so potent. I thought Coke was bad. But when you get to day number 5 and all you've done is have sex, smoke drugs, barely drink anything, let alone a sip of water, you then got the sleep delirium start creeping in. You then start becoming completely delusional. You've then got all these substances go around your body. You know, people start then entering psychosis. I've also witnessed that. You know, believe me, there have been times where the shadow people in my own life have been very real because I've been awake for 5 days. But it has to be spoke about. You know, it's got to be spoke about. And I went through it. I've lived this life. I lived this life for 5 years. And I became hooked. It became me. And I made the decision in January this year to stop. Completely stop. Because I could see, whether I had an epiphany or whatever it was, I don't know, but I can just remember feeling petrified whilst high. Maybe I had an element of psychosis, I don't know. But whatever that feeling was led me to make the decision to stop. You know, because I knew morally and ethically it didn't align with me. You know, but I was doing it as a form of connection, community, because that's all I knew. You know, why would I want to go and join a gardening club when I can go and smoke drugs and have sex with people? That's a sense of community, right? So, but yeah, it's really dangerous. And I just want to say, for anybody listening that can relate to any of what I'm saying, there is always someone to listen to you. Always someone to listen to you. You just need to reach out. And I know it is petrifying admitting to yourself that you've got a problem with drugs, but you've also then got a problem with chemsex. That's a whole different ballgame. Because the fear of being stigmatized, judged, you know, not knowing who you are because all you are is this version of yourself is petrifying. Of course it is. But if you are brave enough and you do have the courage, all you've got to do is just reach out to someone. You know, there are loads of charities out there. There are services, predominantly London-based, that support men who have problems in this area. But yeah, it's I'm very lucky and I'm very grateful to be able to sit here now and discuss very openly with you what that's like and how destructive that is. I mean, yeah, it annihilated me. It tore every bit of my self-worth away. My sense of self evaporated. You know, and I've spent this entire year slowly rebuilding that. You know, slowly understanding who I am. I'm never going to go back to an older version of me because, I don't think that's the point. I think the point in recovery is to nourish and develop a new version of you, a healthier version of you. And that I'm actively in that phase right now. But my God, it's a whole different beast.
And even just hearing you share about it itself, just if if anybody's listening to this, just the audio side, you can kind of see the passion, obviously, with Declan, obviously, of what he's gone through. It's like, yeah, I was with you there on that whole entire journey of like when you first experienced it, to the end. And obviously, I personally don't understand it because I've never been through it. Obviously, I'm not gay, but do you know what? It's amazing that I'm able to have a better understanding, and other people that may be listening can have a better understanding, and also people that are listening that have gone through what you've gone through, and they can go, "Oh my God,
Yeah,
this geezer knows exactly what I'm going through because I'm going through exactly the same thing."
You've really hit the nail on the head there, Josh. It's that I need somebody to explicitly and completely understand what I'm going through in order for me to share that, because there is no other thing like chemsex, because there are so many different elements to it. Unless you've gone through it or you know someone that's gone through it, you're not really going to understand it. So, but I have gone through it. I do understand it, and it's very real. It does exist.
Yeah.
And let's stop ignoring it, because there's an epidemic, and there are people dying. Like, there are gay men dying. I think 3 ambulances a week are called to GHB overdoses.
Wow.
And that's not a good thing.
No, and it's great that you're so passionate about that. And I think, in a weird way, like I normally sit here and say, I'm grateful for what I've gone through. I'm grateful for the scenes of my life that have been absolutely bonkers and probably shouldn't be here today. I'm grateful for them times because, you can be that sort of shining light for somebody that may be going through something similar. So that's exactly the same for you. You're a shining light for someone else that may be going through this and they just don't know how to get out of it. And I'm sure, as well, I think from what I've heard from your story as well, it's having that acceptance, isn't it? Especially, I'm sure, from a gay man's perspective, is trying to be accepted for who you are. Of course, you're going to go for that sort of lifestyle, that culture, especially if it's going to bring all this stuff on the table. And you're like, definitely, I'm up for that. But not realizing the consequences of all of that, the harm you're causing yourself. And the horrible things that other people are using that to their advantage to do that to other people is disgusting, to be fair. I'm not gonna kind of sugarcoat it. It is horrible. It's a horrible thing to do, but it's also I appreciate you kind of just sharing about it and letting us know that shit does go on.
It does go on, and it does exist, and it's very real. And again, like I said earlier, I think me sharing my story and being this vulnerable, I think, comes from growing up on a council estate in a really rough area, because it gives me that thick skin. It gives me that courage, that natural courage. And I appreciate not everybody's like me, but if I can share my story, if I can lift the lid on stuff and be real and authentic and raw, then it might just enable a couple of people to go, I can relate to that.
Definitely. And I think it's important for people that are listening, just because you're from a gay community and you've experienced this chemsex, there's still going to be something that I'm going to walk away from this today and go, do you know what? I've learned a lot from that. Do you know what I mean? Or I can relate to that. We all may be very different in our own ways, but we certainly have something powerful to share.
100%.
We could sit and listen to everybody's story, and I know for a fact I'll walk away from each one of them stories knowing that I've taken something away, regardless. And and that's the most powerful thing, is about, you know, sharing this stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So obviously, you know, you've brought us on an amazing journey, Declan, you know, from the beginning of when you was a young child to then when you came out as gay, and then obviously you experienced the first set of drugs, and then it kind of just spiraled out of control. Now, I know a lot of people are probably kind of going, where's the sort of like positive in everything? You know,
Yeah.
is there a positive side to this? Well, of course there fucking is, because I'm
Yeah.
talking to you today, Declan,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and you've got a beautiful smile in your face. Yeah, the sun's shining out of you. So it must mean something's working. So can you just
Yeah.
please, you know, share with us what's happening for your life today, and where are you at now? Because I want to
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely, mate. And that's really nice. That's a really nice compliment that you can see the sun shining. That's really nice, because I feel that. I really do feel that I'm actively turning my pain into purpose. And it's when I do things like this that I'm realizing this in the moment that, oh my God, I'm talking about my pain, but in a purposeful way. So yes, like I said, I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery since January this year. And like I said before, recovery isn't linear. It's not a destination. It's an ongoing commitment to want to better yourself, right? And that's different, means different things to everyone. Recovery is so self-defined, and I think that's something I've had to accept. But yeah, as of right now, I am fully clean and sober. And funnily enough, I'm a month into a part-time position within my local drug and alcohol services.
Amazing.
And I was purely employed because I was an addict, right? So I've gone from losing jobs because I'm an addict to gaining jobs because of my lived experience with addiction. And I laugh at that, because I'm like, that's just so how the world works, right? How it just comes full circle. It amazes me how things always do work out if you want them to. If you put the work in, things will always work out. So yeah, right now I'm fully clean, fully sober, absolutely loving life, really grateful. I do a lot on social media, which is where me and you first connected, on TikTok. I took a break for a while because I didn't quite know what I wanted to say, etc., etc. So I'm having a bit of a rethink about my content, but I'm sure I'll be back out there soon enough. But as well as my part-time job, I've also gone back to college. So I'm actually studying to become a counsellor, a therapist.
Awesome.
I'm right at the beginning of that journey, yeah. So every Friday I take myself to college with the kids. I sit there in the classroom and I learn how to be a therapist, which is amazing. And what's great about that is that course itself is another tool in my recovery box, because it allows me to be so self-reflective. And it's something that I potentially wouldn't have done, being self-reflective, if I hadn't have gone to that, if I hadn't started studying again. So yeah, life is good right now. I'm in a really good place. I'm really getting into, I'm not going to say back into, but I'm really getting into kind of my nutrition, understanding how health is wealth. It's all an ongoing thing. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. Deck isn't going to be built overnight. But yeah, I'm really starting to carve out my own path. You know, and I'm really, really rebuilding my entire life from the ground up at 35 years old. And that excites me. It really does excite me, because I'm like, I can be anyone. I can do anything, right? I can do anything. And not only does that set my ADHD on fire, I can rein myself back in. But seriously, I can do anything, you know, and that really does excite me. But yeah, I'm in a really good place. I've got a great family around me. I've got a great group of friends. And I tell you what, Josh, one of the biggest things that's really saved me this year and enabled me to become this version of myself is I've joined a LERO, which is a lived experience recovery organisation in Bristol. We're not quite fully formed yet, but there's about 16 of us, all from different lived experiences, different substance misuse, etc., etc. And we're putting together this fantastic group of people ready to go out into the public kind of early next year. And amazing. I'll tell you what, mate, I feel like I'm home when I'm with them.
Yeah.
I really do feel like I'm home. And I really do feel that they completely understand me.
That's amazing.
And yeah, there's so many positive things that I'm excited about.
Yeah. That's just the beginning. That's just the beginning, isn't it?
Right? And I'm like,
that's just the beginning.
Fuck me. I've only been in recovery since January and I've already done a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
That's amazing.
But I also have to be mindful that I can't use that as a coping mechanism. I can't continually keep myself busy. I've got to allow myself the time just to exist.
Definitely.
Which I'm getting better at. I'm getting better at that, but that causes problems when you've got ADHD because you can't keep fucking still. So I'm learning to do stuff with intention, which is interesting.
That's just phenomenal. I really appreciate you sharing that as well, Declan, because again, yes, we have our stories and some people that don't understand it, they go, what's a bit doom and gloom? But there is them opportunities that we can change and we are changing. It kind of puts two fingers up at people that just think, oh no, they'll never change. That we can. Sometimes we have to keep going around that roundabout a few times before we turn off and go, I'm prepared to change. And that's what you've done. And I absolutely, applaud you. And I really take my hat off to you for being able to step out, and make the change for yourself, not for anybody else, but for yourself. And I think that's so important for anyone that's listening as well. When you do make these changes, just do them for you, because the world is your oyster. Just like Declan, Declan's had some amazing opportunities already, and he's taken them on board. And you've, got your own. What I love, what you said as well. You said you had your own sort of community now. You've got your own family that you're like, this is where I'm meant to be, and may that long continue for you. And I actually would love, when you guys are all set up and stuff, I'd love to pop up and see you guys. See you guys, and we could do maybe like a TikTok video interview thing, or we could do some stuff. So that'll be pretty cool. So whoever's listening at home, obviously stand by with that, because I think that would be really, really cool. That would be some cool listening, I think. But Declan, listen, I am going to say thank you so much for your time today, for giving up your personal time to come on this show and to share your strength, hope, and the message that you've given us today is powerful. And I just want to let anyone at home that's listening, if anybody wants to know any more information or would like to reach out to Declan, where can we find you? Where's your TikTok?
So I have a website. It's probably the easiest thing, which is www.adhdeck.co.uk. All of my contact details are on there. My socials are on there. My stories on there. So if you want to go and visit that, that's adhdeck.co.uk. Feel free. Get in touch. Awesome. If you're struggling, if you need someone to hear you and understand you, I'm here.
Awesome. So there you go, guys. Definitely reach out. You're not alone. And thank you once again, Declan, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, mate, for having me. I really, really appreciate you giving me this opportunity. Thanks, bud.
Cheers.